We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series, and today we're taking a look at the 24th ranked team from the regular season, the Montreal Canadiens. What moves should we expect from them before next season? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. So of course, if you're new to this series, we've started counting down the teams from the 31st ranked team, Detroit, and we're going to work our way all the way up to number one as we go through what to expect from each of these NHL teams during the 2020 abbreviated NHL offseason here as they get ready for next year. So we're going to take a look at their cap space, what contracts they have coming up, and before we get into that, we're going to do a quick recap here just to let you know where everything stands during their 1920 NHL season before we get into what to expect here. So let's start off with that. We're going to recap the 1920 season for the Montreal Canadiens. So they have a 31-9 record for 71 points. Of course, 24th best in the NHL, ahead of a couple of teams in their division, primarily just Ottawa and Detroit. So not an overall great season for the Habs, but they did get a chance to go into the NHL play-in series. Obviously, because of everything that went on, they had an expanded format this year where the top 24 teams, or top 12 in each conference, got to go to the play-in series for an opportunity to play in the 2020 Stanley Cup Playoffs. And the Montreal Canadiens got to do battle with the much higher-ranked Pittsburgh Penguins, but they came out victorious. Pittsburgh did not have a great series. Montreal got great goaltending from Carey Price. And even though they had a not-so-great regular season, they made up for it by getting into the playoffs and defeating the Penguins in that qualifying round. Now, of course, once they get into the playoffs, things were a little different, and they ended up losing in the next round in the NHL playoffs. But still, overall, I think we can say it ended up being more successful than they really ever imagined when the NHL season was first paused back in March. Now, the Montreal Canadiens scored 208 goals during the regular season while giving up 220 against, so not a great differential. Obviously, it puts them in a negative, but clearly they're lower in the standings. They actually didn't do as bad as some of the other teams that are kind of around them, so overall, not too bad, but not great either. When it comes to their special teams, the Habs had the 22nd ranked power play in the NHL with a percentage of 17.7%. On the PK, they were slightly better at 19th best in the NHL at 78.7. So obviously there's areas of this team that need to improve upon. We saw some big gains from the youngsters during the return to play in the play-in series. We saw guys like Suzuki and Kotkaniemi really step up their game, and there's been a lot of interesting things around this team when it comes to trade speculation and contracts and who they might be looking at for free agents, etc. Since the season's ended, and we've already seen Marc Bergevin kind of play out some of his cards and what he wants to do during this offseason because he's already made a couple of acquisitions. So let's first off get into the cap space and other contracts that are pending here right now, and then we'll take a look at the moves he's already made and what else we expect from them before next season starts. So as you can see here from CapFriendly.com, the Habs have a pretty decent salary cap situation. They have 19 players under contract for next year, and they have $12.9 million in salary cap space to work with here. Now, of course, they do have a little bit of flexibility within that regard because there is the Carl Alsner contract as well that can either be buried in the minors or hopefully maybe they can find a way to move on from that this year. There's possibility they could buy him out, etc. So that number could very well change, but they're in a pretty good spot. Bergevin has not been overly, going out and doing much in free agency. They haven't spent a ton of money in the last couple of years. They've been hoarding draft picks as well. So when it comes to their draft situation and cap space, they're in a really excellent situation in that regard. Now, let's take a look at what contracts are expiring. Which players do they need to consider re-signing for next year, or if not, then replacing? Let's take a look first at their list of restricted free agents, which includes right at the top, we have forward Max Domi. Of course, there's a lot of talk around Domi, a hot topic in Montreal media, as well as around the NHL about what his future holds, whether or not he'll be back in Montreal, and certainly a player we're going to be discussing here a little bit further. Also have forward Charles Hudon. Hudon's been in the organization for a long time, has never really developed into a regular solid player, so it's debatable if he returns. Could they maybe give him a one-year deal where he could go up and down between the NHL and AHL? Maybe, but not a guarantee that he's back. On the blue line, they have Victor Mete and Xavier Ouellet. Mete, there's some more talk around him now lately as well, after some of the other moves we've seen, but certainly he'll get a contract and he'll play in the NHL. Just a matter of where is this future going to be, in Montreal or is it elsewhere? They've also got Noah Juleson as well, another Blue Liner battled injury. We'll see what the youngster has in store for him. I would expect him to be signed. And they also have forward Jake Evans, who did get a chance to play a bit more during the return to play. I did see some fourth line duty at times. So obviously he likely gets an opportunity as well. On the UFA side of things, they do have forward Dale Weiss, who's not going to be returning. There was already reports before the season was even over that he already had something lined up to go play in Europe. And that he would be signing over there. I'm not sure what league. I think it was a Swiss league, but correct me if I'm wrong. I can't recall exactly where it was, but I know he had something lined up, but it was going to be playing out for the remainder of the season with Montreal. So Weiss, his days in the NHL are probably over for now. And if he goes to play in Europe for a couple of years, that very well could be where he finishes up. Difficult to say for sure. And they also, on the blue line, they have Christian Folin as well. Debatable if he's back. And then, of course, they have the newly acquired Joel Edmondson, who they acquired his signing rights from the Carolina Hurricanes just a few days ago in exchange for a 2020 fifth-round selection. Obviously, the Habs acquired him with the intention of signing him, so I'm sure that he's a player that Marc Bergevin wants to get under contract and get that big frame and body on the blue line helping the Habs defend next year. Now let's take a look at what are the burning questions around this team for next year. What other moves do we expect? Because Marc Bergevin clearly has been a busy guy so far. We already know that he's addressed the goaltending situation. Obviously, it was clear that they wanted to get a more reliable backup. That was well noted after the season was over. Not surprised he went out and done it right away when he found the deal with Jake Allen in St. Louis. I think some people looked at it as being a very expensive backup, and to a degree it is. But the Habs have the cap space to work with to make that happen. He only has a year left on his contract, so it's short term. Even if Jake remains in Montreal beyond the season, he could re-sign for a more reasonable backup goalie contract after that. But they have Caden Primo waiting in the wings here, developing and working in the minor leagues. It takes the pressure off him to be able to go down and focus on his development this year. And obviously, maybe we'll see next year if he's ready to take on the role of full-time backup. And if he's not, like I said, they have the option to try to sign Jake to an extension for another year or so at a cheaper amount to make it more affordable. But obviously that has already been addressed. One of the big questions lately that we keep hearing about from NHL insiders is Max Domi and Phillip Danault both have question marks on their futures for different reasons. When it comes to Domi, he wasn't really thrilled with how he was utilized. He was mostly in a fourth line role during the return to play. He prefers to play center, been mostly either a fourth line center or a winger, so he hasn't really been pleased with how he's been used. He's an RFA, needs a new deal. There's a lot of talk that maybe the Habs don't want to pay him what he's looking for, and that he could be traded. And then at the end of the year, which was a little bit surprising, we got some remarks from center iceman Phillip Danault indicating that he wasn't really overly happy with how he was utilized, mainly because he, for quite a while there, was always a top two center iceman, a lot of times a top center iceman in Montreal, because of the fact that they just were not deep enough in that position. That's not an area that they were not very strong at for a long time, but in the past year or two, they've really built up having more options in there by bringing in Domi, and then youngsters like Kotkaniemi and Suzuki getting an opportunity and doing well with it. But with the way Suzuki was playing, he's basically taking the top spot, and then Kotkaniemi was getting second line duty quite a bit, and Danault was often playing on the third line. His minutes went down. But you know what? In a lot of teams, really, I think Phillip Danault is best suited for a 2 or 3 center anyway. I mean, he's got a career high of 13 goals. He does have some seasons with some more points, but obviously they're still not huge numbers, but it's mostly because he was getting those opportunities, and really, he's one of the better two-way centers around the league. I think he's a great player. I really like Phillip Danault. I think he's a great player for the Habs. I'd hate to see him leave because they picked him up for Chicago for almost nothing. It was a steal of a deal. He's turned out to be a fantastic player. Was number 6 in Selke Trophy voting this current season, but obviously he's used to getting a bigger role and is not pleased with how it kind of diminished with the younger players kind of taking over. So he's got 1 year left on his contract. It's unclear what he's going to want on his new one for an extension. And Marc Bergevin may not be able to keep Domi and Danault both if they both insist on playing higher in the lineup. And if they want out, if they're not going to get that, then clearly he can't do that to both of them, and also give the playing time to Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. So they have some tough choices to make. It's quite likely that both of these players do not return next year. I guess if I had to pick, I'd probably keep Danault and trade Domi. That would probably be my choice because I think the type of player Danault is a little bit harder to find. But at the same time, you got a guy like Domi who's really seemed to fit well there. I know his numbers were down this year, but he plays hard. He seems to do well with the big spotlight in Montreal. Not afraid to drop the gloves. Plays physical. So overall, I kind of like what he brought to the team. So it'd really be a shame to see either player go, but I can understand to a degree why they're not overly thrilled with how they were utilized in the lineup. But at the end of the day here, Marc Bergevin is going to have some tough choices to make. When it comes to Danault, though, if he's looking for $6-7 million on his next contract, that's going to prove too expensive. You don't want to pay that kind of money to somebody who's going to be playing lower in your lineup. That just does not make sense. And it's going to take away from money they're going to have to spend on guys like Suzuki and Kotkaniemi when their ELCs are expiring and they need a raise on their next contract. So we'll see what happens. But I guess for Habs fans watching this video, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on these two players. If you can only keep one, which one are you going to keep and why? And let me know down in the comments. And of course, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of talk that the Habs were going to address their blue line. And they've already taken a step in that direction by acquiring Joel Edmondson. Of course, he's a huge guy, plays the left side. He's got some great experience coming from St. Louis, where he was part of the Stanley Cup Championship, played last year in Carolina. I think in a degree here, his minutes were higher in Carolina than they normally would have been because they had a lot of injuries on their blue line this past year. But he did get to play a pretty significant role, often in the top four in Carolina. But obviously, when they look at their blue line situation, and they had more than enough capable NHL blue liners, they decided he was expendable as well. So I think that to a degree, he could be a great fit in Montreal. But two teams now in 2 years have decided that he was the guy they could part with. So maybe he proves them wrong and plays a bigger role in Montreal, or maybe he comes in just to be that more stable third pair guy. Either way, he's a pretty decent defender. He's got big size, can make the Habs harder to play against. I think that he's a good acquisition. Obviously, depends on what the contract works out to be, but he's really not, used to making big money anyway. So overall, I think Bergevin should be able to get him signed and obviously make him a part of that blue line and help them defend better next year. Of course, the right side's already pretty secure with Weber and Petrie. They do have a lot of players, though, including Petrie, that are eligible for contract extensions, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see which of these guys get extended this year. Some of them might have to wait. What does the future hold for this team? You've got Brendan Gallagher, you get Thomas Tatar, you get Jeff Petrie. There's some interesting names there as to, they've been pretty big roles in the team in the last few years, and some of them even longer. So clearly, it's an interesting time for Montreal to see how they shape the future. Are these veteran guys that have been around and being a big part of the team going to continue to be that way, or are they going to have some turnover here? Because Montreal has also been rumored to maybe go after a big-time player, kind of go big game hunting in free agency. Not that there's going to be a ton of it out there, but we saw last year that Marc Bergevin was not afraid to haul out the offer sheet. And he's tried even before that with other free agents like John Tavares. I know he didn't get real far, and the Habs have had somewhat of a difficult time attracting free agents to Montreal in the past few years. But it's still, he's been trying, and there's been a lot of talk that they would like to have another game-breaking type of scorer in the forward group, and then maybe they would try to go after a guy like Taylor Hall in free agency. We've heard numerous NHL insiders indicate that Hall would be open to going to a team like the Habs, because of the fact that he's used to playing in the Canadian market, where he played in Edmonton for a long time. So he's used to the spotlight, he's used to the media and all the attention that you get. He's probably looking for a shorter term contract, but maybe with some big money attached for an opportunity to win. I guess it depends on how he views Montreal, on how quickly they can be a contender. That's probably going to be important to him. Clearly they took some big steps this year, but does he see them being a contender as early as next year? I'm not sure how he feels about that. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I can see them being more of a playoff contender. I'm not sure if I'm ready to put them into the cup contender here yet. I think they have some more ways to continue to get better before we can honestly say that. But could we see Marc Bergevin make another big move to bolster that forward group? Could he go after an offer sheet? I mean, really, if he's going to offer sheet anybody, you would think maybe a guy like Matthew Barzal with the Islanders would be a prime candidate. There's certainly some other RFAs out there as well on teams that are going to be really tight against the cap, that are going to have to make some moves, like the guys in Tampa, like Sergachev and Cirelli. So there's some interesting names out there for teams that they're going to have no choice but to shed salary to pay their RFAs. And clearly, some of them are going to have an easier time than not to do that. Like Tampa, they have so many no trade clauses. That's not going to be an easy deal. There's already been some talk from Chris Johnston about Barzal and would he consider signing an offer sheet. It's not really known how he feels about everything and what he wants to do with his future. But I would not be surprised to see something big out of Bergevin is the moral of the story here. Whether or not he goes down the offer sheet road or into free agency to sign a big-time player to make a big move and put this cap space to use. They've already seen him use some of those draft picks to make acquisitions like Allen and Edmondson. And I would not be one bit surprised if we continue to see him make additional moves here as well, because he still has lots of picks to work with his currency. We're going to see Alex Romanov join the team next year. Hard to say how big of a role he gets right off the bat. They probably want to protect him and ease him in, which is why they're acquiring other players like Edmondson to kind of shore up that left side. With Edmondson and Romanov coming into the mix, though, you can't help but wonder if a guy like Victor Mete is going to be there longer term. They have Ben Sherratt. They have Brett Kulak. That's a lot of left side defensemen there, so I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them is moved out. Where exactly they go or who that turns out to be, hard to say. I'd say probably not Sherratt. I probably would have said more likely Kulak maybe a few months ago, but I think I was kind of impressed with how he played during the return to play, so maybe they keep Kulak, I don't know. But again, maybe they trade him while his value is a little bit better too. Difficult to say, but they could go with Sherratt, Edmondson, Romanov in the left side for next year. Maybe Mete finds his way out. So maybe guys like Mete and Kulak get moved. Difficult to say, but I do expect to see some more changes on the Habs blue line, assuming Edmondson does get signed and get a contract. So to summarize here, I do expect Marc Bergevin and the Habs to be an incredibly busy team. I think we're going to see lots of moves. Some of them might be small. Some of them could be pretty significant. So let me know what you think down in the comments for what moves you expect to see the Habs make before the start of next season, and we can discuss further down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.